Unsung Murder Ballads discusses topics of a disturbing nature.
And we're not going to hold back on the graphic details and disturbing content.
So we do not recommend our podcast for children under the age of 13.
And while we respect the victims and their families involved in these tragic cases,
we're also going to be critical of mistakes that are made during the investigations.
And we're going to use dark humor to express ourselves now and then.
So with that said, this podcast may not be for everyone.
And that's okay. We're glad you're here checking us out.
And if you've made it this far, welcome to the Unsung Murder Ballads family. And follow us on Instagram at Unsung Murder Ballads if you want to talk to us.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Unsung Murder Ballads. This is episode 69. I am Janice Dead. That's so funny. Well, I am Janice Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
I'm Joyous Dead. I just had to fuck up our whole
It's okay.
Our whole groove.
I'm going to keep that in there. That was funny. We don't get too many of those that often. And I also think you guys, because it's been so long since we've all been together, you forgot how we were doing that.
Yeah, I forgot our cadence.
For those who listened 2 episodes ago, a week ago, you heard that we were going to do a For Joyous's information episode this week, which is why we brought the 3 of us together. So that's exciting. And
we can have the contrast of me who knows nothing and then the 2 of you who know everything.
Well, it's interesting because I've learned that Jameson knows most, but sometimes he doesn't know all the little details. And I think that may also be true for this case.
There are smaller things either I don't remember or that are new to me, but I know the bulk of stuff. So even though I know a good majority of it, it's good to have those things reminded or to learn new things about the case that I know.
Yeah, and when I'm doing the research, I'm like, holy crap, I didn't know that. So yeah, it's fun. So this week we're doing JonBenet Ramsey. So Joyous,
this is going to be a good one.
What do you think you know about JonBenet?
What do I think I know about JonBenet? I think there was a JonBenet Ramsey Beanie Baby. It was referenced on an episode of Broad City. You know, some listeners may have seen that show. Pretty sure a young child was murdered, suspicious, maybe murdered by a sibling, ? Maybe it happened in their home.
Okay.
And it's very suspicious, and I know it's kind of a meme.
Okay, so you know more about this one than you have the other ones we've done. So that's interesting.
Okay, cool.
I do want to specify that it is unsolved, and even though people have put forward many theories, we do not know who did it. And in this particular case, we may voice our thoughts on it, but we are absolutely in no way saying any one particular person did anything. Oh, so before we begin, though, did you hear what happened in this past week? Probably not, because,
in regards to?
So remember the Snowtown murders case we did with the people that were killing? They thought people were pedophiles or because they were gay and they were murdering them and they put them in barrels inside a bank.
Yeah, of course.
Yes.
Yeah, Mark Hayden, one of the 3 perpetrators, was released this past week.
What?
Damn.
Yes.
Oh, crap.
He was released on parole. They gave him kind of a couple months in a halfway house or whatever, but now he's out in society out in Australia.
Well, that's alarming.
Yeah, it's one of those things he was the one that supposedly did less than the rest of them, but yeah, I wouldn't have let him out.
Yeah, that's wild.
I mean, it's funny because I know they let one of the Manson family killers out after 60 years in prison right before she died. And even that I was surprised happened, but this guy is in his 60s, so while he's maybe not as big a threat, it's still kind of crazy.
Yeah, definitely. Wow.
But I figured I'd throw that little update out there for anyone who's been listening, and the fact that we covered that case, I don't know, 4 months ago.
Always good to stay informed.
Okay, so before we begin, I do want to state up front that in many ways I will be jumping ahead and back in time regarding certain aspects of the case and its investigation. So if we're touching upon a particular clue, before I move on from that clue, I will kind of talk about certain things the police did with it, even though it jumps ahead. But simply because we know this is unsolved, and I don't see a reason to keep building the suspense for every little object. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
JonBenet Patricia Ramsey was born on August 6, 1990 in Atlanta, the younger of 2 children to Patricia Patsy Ramsey and JonBenet Ramsey. She also has an older brother named Burke. JonBenet's first name combines her father's first and middle names, and her middle name is her mother's first name. So therefore you get, instead of JonBenet, you get JonBenet.
Very interesting way to pass down the names. Okay.
It's really weird. And I was thinking about that. It's very egotistical.
Yeah, like there was another sibling you could have given the father's name to.
That's very true, because they named him Burke.
People are funny, aren't they?
It's really weird. And then to take it and turn it into JonBenet, especially knowing... Go ahead.
Poor kid must have been confused, at people calling her, him, and, all kinds of stuff. Because if you don't know.
Do you remember being a kid in school and it's the first day of class and the teacher's mispronouncing all those weird names? That's exactly what's happening to her in her classrooms.
For sure.
Oh, yeah. I mean, everyone's going to say JonBenet, and then she's going to raise her hand and be like, actually, it's JonBenet. It's
They're
weird.
Like, your name's John.
Well, it's all one word, so there's that. But still, it's weird.
I don't think that saves it much.
Yeah,
no
kids
way.
are going to tear her apart. You're right. So John Ramsey was a businessman who was the president of Access Graphics, a computer software company that later became a subsidiary of Lockheed Martin. In 1991, the Ramseys moved to Boulder, Colorado, where Access Graphics headquarters was located. JonBenet was enrolled in kindergarten at High Peaks Elementary School in Boulder. Patsy Ramsey entered JonBenet in various child beauty pageants in Boulder, where she won the titles of America's Royal Miss, Little Miss Carvolet, Little Miss Colorado, Colorado All-State Kids Cover Girl, and National Tiny Miss Beauty.
I hate all these titles. Can I just say that?
They're awful, and they're awful to say.
Little Tiny Miss Beauty. I hate it. What is that?
And the thing about this is, I mean, obviously, there's a lifestyle to that isn't necessarily good for kids.
Not at all. It teaches them all kinds of shallow, very superficial things.
And it's more for the parents than it is for the kids, at least initially. Yeah,
it's a lot of treating your child like a doll, dressing them up.
Exactly.
Or having them live through something you couldn't accomplish in that.
That's usually a big one, yes.
Yeah.
So JonBenet's active role in child beauty pageants and Patsy's reported pageant mother behavior would be heavily reported by the media after her murder. As JonBenet was so young at the time of her death, and because I'd like to keep this as a single episode, I will not break down all the little details of her short life. We're going to kind of jump right to the point, because there are some theories that involved grandparents and pedophiles from pageants, but none of those are substantiated, so we're not really going to go into that. So if that's the kind of thing that interests our listeners, I would refer you to podcasts that cover it in greater detail than we're going to do here. So suffice to say, she was a young child, and by all accounts, she was a joy to be around and was living a normal life. And all that included the beauty pageants and all that come with those. So on Christmas of 1996, after attending a Christmas party hosted by a family friend named Fleet White, the Ramseys went home and JonBenet went to bed. It's pretty straightforward. Some theorize that JonBenet snuck back downstairs and got into an argument with her brother over a late-night snack of pineapple. This theory stems from the fact that an undigested piece of pineapple was found in JonBenet's stomach, and there was a bowl of the fruit that was found on the table with only Burke's fingerprints on the bowl.
Some loose-ass evidence. All right.
But we'll get into all of it, because, you'll see. But officially, the Ramseys have stated that Burke was asleep the entire night. At 5:30 a.m., Patsy got up to make coffee, and she discovered a 2.5-paged, handwritten ransom note on the back stairs leading to her kitchen.
What the fuck?
Here is the ransom note in its entirety. Mr. Ramsey, listen carefully! ! We are a group of individuals that represent a small foreign faction. We do respect your business, which is spelled wrong, but not the country that it serves. At this time, we have your daughter in our possession, also spelled wrong. She is safe and unharmed, And if you want her to see 1997, you must follow our instructions to the letter. You will withdraw $118,000 from your account. $100,000 will be in $100 bills, and the remaining $18,000 will be in $20 bills. Make sure that you bring an adequate size attaché to the bank. When you get home, you will put the money in brown paper bags. I will call you between 8 and 10 a.m. tomorrow to instruct you on delivery. The delivery will be exhausting, so I advise you to be rested. If we monitor you getting the money early, we might call you early to arrange an earlier delivery of the money, and hence an earlier delivery pickup of your daughter.
This is very odd.
Any deviation of my instructions will result in the immediate execution of your daughter. You will also be denied her remains for proper burial. The two gentlemen watching over your daughter do not particularly like you, so I advise you do not provoke them. Speaking to anyone about your situation, such as the police, FBI, etc., will result in your daughter being beheaded. If we catch you talking to a stray dog, she dies. If you alert bank authorities, she dies. If the money is in any way marked or tampered with, she dies. You will be scanned for electronic devices, and if any are found, she dies. You can try to deceive us, but we warn you that we are familiar with law enforcement countermeasures and tactics. You stand a 99% chance of killing your daughter if you try to outsmart us. Follow our instructions, and you stand a 100% chance of getting her back. You and your family are under constant scrutiny as well as the authorities. Don't try to grow a brain, John. You are not the only fat cat around, so don't think that killing will be difficult. Don't underestimate us, John. Use that good Southern common sense of yours. It is up to you now, John. Victory! ! And then the letters SBTC. That's the whole letter.
What the fuck?
It's a bizarre one.
That's
very
a really
awkward.
weird note. Yeah.
It goes on for a while. Like, that was harder to read than I thought it was going to be.
Yeah, it's like long and very like convoluted and like,
Yeah.
I guess not really. It's very to the point, but like
No, but it adds things
it feels
for no
weird.
reason.
Like the vibe of it feels off.
Yeah, they're adding things like if you speak to a stray dog, she dies.
Yeah, that was weird.
What? Like, so
Yeah,
don't.
like it almost comes off as like, because they're saying they were like a foreign entity. Like it almost makes sense. It's like it's almost coming off like they're using an idiom in another language that they translated and thought it would still make sense.
Okay, fair, but it's still really
You know what I
weird.
mean?
Yeah. So Patsy calls the police at 5:52 a.m. So she barely hesitates.
Yeah.
Two police officers respond to the 911 call and arrived at the Ramseys' home in 3 minutes. So apparently Boulder had nothing else going on that night.
Yeah, that's a quick response time. Wow.
They conducted a cursory search of the house but did not find any signs of forced entry. Officer Rick French went to the basement and came to a door that was secured by a wooden latch. He paused for a moment in front of the door but walked away without opening it because he was looking for an exit route used by the kidnapper, which the closed inside peg kind of ruled out. That room, yeah. Spoiler alert, JonBenet's body is behind that door.
Oh my God.
So John pointed out to police that the dollar amount asked for in the ransom note was nearly identical to a Christmas bonus that he received, which suggested that whoever wrote the note had information regarding that.
Oh.
Investigators looked at several theories behind the dollar amount that was demanded, considering employees at Access Graphic who may have known the amount of his bonus prior. But they also looked into the possibility that the ransom note demand referenced Psalm 118 from the Bible and maybe spoke to some sort of religious source as a possible relevance to the note.
Interesting.
I looked up that psalm, and it really is just about duty to God. So
Yeah, that's like that feels like a stretch.
Yeah, there was no connection.
I always thought it was a weird amount.
It is, and it's too coincidental that he got a Christmas bonus for roughly that amount.
Yeah, like that sounds like way more likely. Like they were able to like get into the because they said they're like they have a problem with his work, right?
Right.
So it would make sense that they got access to work files and find out, oh, you have this money. It probably was just deposited in your account.
Right. Again, the whole thing just suggests something so bizarre to what we're normally hearing in ransom cases. Usually it's just a quick like, hey, pay this money or she dies.
Right.
Here's an interesting little fact. Now remember, I said this was a 2.5-paged handwritten note. Police also found a practice draft in the trash bin in the home.
That's
Weird.
insane.
So the note and the draft were also written with a pen and a notebook from the Ramseys' home, in particular from Patsy's stationery.
What? Huh?
So, yeah, exactly.
Weird.
So the FBI told police that it was unusual for such a note to be written at the crime scene.
Yeah, that is fucking weird.
And as they looked at the ransom
And to be
note,
written in handwriting.
yeah, they stopped to write it out themselves and then fucked it up, tore it up, threw it away, and wrote it again.
Right? And like it wasn't pre-drafted and it wasn't like handwriting can be traced. Like this is weird behavior.
It's really weird. Yeah. So here's another thing. So they're looking at the ransom note and they realize that it actually starts to, some of it is echoing dialogue from famous movies.
All right. So clearly inexperienced and just kind of taking stuff from
wherever.
known sources.
And to be specific, there's a number of movies that involved ransom notes that they feel were the inspirations for this note, including the films Ruthless People, Ransom, Escape from New York, Speed, and Dirty Harry. Joyous, you might be too young to remember most of those.
Yeah.
But I remember them, and I remember like, oh yeah, like Ransom is brilliant. And this is a little tangent, so I apologize to listeners. But this is a Mel Gibson movie where someone kidnaps I think it's his whole family, and they want a certain amount of money paid at a certain time. So he calls a press conference, and he has the entirety of the ransom in cash on this table in front of him. And he says to the press, live on the news, he says, this is the money the kidnappers want. I'm not giving it to them. I'm going to give it to the person who brings me their heads. And it was
shit.
Yeah, it was a brilliant movie in that regard. So, yeah, that one's a good one. Tangent over. We digress.
I love our tangents.
All right, so the FBI also said this ransom note was unusually long. And police believed that the note was staged because it didn't have any fingerprints on it except for Patsy's and any police officers who handled it. Which, I mean, doesn't really mean anything because they could have been wearing gloves and it's her stationery, so her fingerprints should be on it.
Right, exactly. That makes sense.
So to break that down just a little bit more, in the midst of kidnapping a child from her home, someone stopped and used a notepad from the home to write a lengthy ransom note and then rewrite it until it met their approval. Experts tested to see how long it would have taken to write the entire note and the draft, and it was determined that it would have taken longer than 21 minutes.
Huh.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a long time to be in the middle.
And that's never mind like the thinking of what to write.
Right, exactly. And think about it. I mean, even if they did it before they went and took JonBenet, that's still a long time to be sitting in someone's house writing your ransom note. Doesn't make sense.
Weird behavior.
So according to the Colorado Bureau of Investigation report, there were indications that the author of the ransom note was Patsy Ramsey. However, the evidence fell short of a definitive conclusion. Michael Baden, a board-certified forensic pathologist who had consulted with both sides of the case, said that he had never seen a note like it in his 60 years of experience, and he did not think it was likely that it was written by an outside stranger. A federal court ruled it highly unlikely that Patsy wrote the note, citing opinions of 6 certified handwriting experts. But the courts bemoaned the existence of self-proclaimed experts without credentials trying to enter the case by accusing Patsy without scientific basis. So you can see this went on back and forth for a while for Patsy Ramsey, where they thought she wrote it, but then they're saying she didn't. That's a big piece that kind of still lingers in the air out there.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so back to the morning of December 26th. And this is what I mean about me jumping forward a little bit. With JonBenet still missing, John begins making arrangements to pay the ransom. Now, a little side note again. The ransom note contains specific instructions against contacting police and friends, but Patsy telephoned police at 5:52 a.m.
Right, like right away.
She also called family and friends and invited them over. A forensics team was dispatched to the house. The team initially believed that JonBenet had been kidnapped from her bedroom, so that was the only room in the house that they thought was important, and cordoned that off to prevent contamination of evidence. However, they took no precautions to prevent contamination of evidence throughout the rest of the house.
That makes no sense.
Yeah, big red flag right there.
Meanwhile, friends, victims advocates, the Ramsey's family minister arrived at the home to show their support, and visitors even went so far to start picking up and cleaning surfaces of the kitchen.
Oh, come on, really?
Yeah.
That's insane.
Yep. Idiots. The Boulder police really dropped the ball on this one. There's no doubt about that. So Boulder detective Linda Arndt arrived at about 8 a.m. in anticipation of receiving further instructions by the kidnappers, but there was never any attempt by anyone to claim the money. By 1 p.m., Detective Arndt asked John Ramsey and family friend Fleet White to search the house to see if anything seemed amiss. She sent them off alone to search the house for basically evidence. They started to search in the basement. John opened the latched door that Officer French had passed by earlier and found his daughter's body on the other side.
Ooh, fucking awful.
JonBenet's mouth was covered with duct tape. There was a nylon cord found around her wrists and neck, and her torso was covered by a white blanket.
Ooh.
John picked up JonBenet's body and brought her upstairs. Keep in mind that when JonBenet was moved, the crime scene was further contaminated, and critical forensic evidence was disturbed for the forensics teams.
Just awful. Like, that kills me.
I can understand a father being so upset that he's just going to run and grab his daughter. I get that.
Right, yeah,
I get that
and
part.
maybe a part of his delusion is like she needs medical attention, like she's not dead.
Right, which is precisely why it shouldn't have been him walking around the house.
Exactly.
So John brought JonBenet up to the living room, and he laid her down and basically in front of the Christmas tree and laid a blanket on top of her. The only people known to have been in the house the night of JonBenet's death was her immediate family, Patsy, John, and Burke. Each of the Ramseys provided handwriting, blood, and hair samples to police. John and Patsy participated in a preliminary interview for more than 2 hours, and Burke was eventually interviewed within the first couple of weeks following JonBenet's death. However, formal interviews with John and Patsy were not held until 4 months later, as the Ramseys kept refusing.
Huh.
Yeah.
How can you refuse, though? Wouldn't they just be able to force you?
I mean, they would have to arrest you. There wasn't enough evidence for them to be arrested.
Right, they just needed to find out anything of what's going on.
And I'm sure there were lawyers involved. In fact, at some point during all this, John is overheard on the phone making plans for the family to leave Boulder and go to, I think it's Atlanta. And the police had to be like, you can't go anywhere.
Right, like we're fucking investigating your child's murder.
Exactly. So it's suspicious across the board. So you can kind of see why investigators would immediately look at the family. So the autopsy revealed that JonBenet had been killed by strangulation and a skull fracture.
Ooh.
The official cause of death was asphyxia by strangulation associated with craniocerebral trauma. There was a perfectly rectangular indentation, like trauma, to her head.
Oh.
There were also 2 marks on her body that resembled taser marks. Like they were perfectly spaced as if someone had hit her with a taser.
Oh, God, what the fuck?
Yeah.
This is
really
weird.
horrifying stuff.
Yeah, this whole case is fucking bizarre.
Yeah, it already doesn't make sense. The ransom note when she's already dead,
When we get to the end, I'm sure like many people, you'll come to a conclusion. And keep in mind, anything we say like that is just our thoughts. But you'll see. I think there's a clear path where all of that begins to make sense. But we'll get to that after. So there was no evidence of conventional rape, although sexual assault could not be ruled out. Although no semen was found, there was evidence of some sort of vaginal injury.
Oh no.
So this is where some people speculate that she may have been abused by someone prior, and that just sort of showed up at that point. Which is why I didn't really go into any of it, because it's not important to this part of the story. It might be if we wanted to make the list of suspects much, much longer, but we don't want to do that. At the time of the autopsy, the pathologist recorded that it appeared that her vaginal area had been wiped clean with a cloth, however.
Oh, rough.
Ugh.
Her death was ruled as a homicide, obviously.
Yup.
A garrote had been made from a length of nylon cord and a broken handle of a paintbrush that was tied around JonBenet's neck that apparently had been used to strangle her. Part of the bristle end of the paintbrush was found in a tub containing Patsy's art supplies, but the bottom third of it had never been found despite an extensive search of the house. So once again, another part of the murder weapon was basically made by something that was already in the house.
Yeah.
It's incredibly suspicious.
Very fucking weird.
Now, again, the autopsy revealed that a vegetable or fruit material, which may represent pineapple, was in her stomach. That's like officially a quote.
Okay.
Which JonBenet had eaten a few hours before her death, because it really wasn't digested very well.
Okay.
Photographs of the home taken on the day when JonBenet's body was found showed the bowl of pineapple on the kitchen table with a spoon in it. However, neither John nor Patsy said they remembered putting the bowl on the table or feeding pineapple to JonBenet. And as stated earlier, police reports found that Burke Ramsey's fingerprints were on the bowl. The Ramseys have always said that Burke slept through the entire night until he was awakened several hours after the police had arrived. So he slept through even the beginning of this mess. Which again, I remember how heavy I slept as like a 10-year-old kid. So it's not impossible.
Yeah, I'd believe that.
So in December of 2003, jumping ahead, forensics investigators extracted enough material from a mixed blood sample found on JonBenet's underwear to establish a DNA profile. That DNA belonged to an unknown male and excluded the DNA of each of the Ramseys.
Huh.
So basically, some other guy touched her underwear.
Ugh.
The DNA was submitted to the FBI's Combined DNA Index System, or CODIS, which is a database containing more than 1.6 million DNA profiles, but the sample did not match any profile in the database.
That's wow.
In October of 2016, jumping ahead again, a report said that new forensics analysis with more sensitive techniques revealed that the original DNA contained genetic markers of 2 individuals other than JonBenet.
Huh.
A. James Kohler, who was the lead investigator for the DA's office, said that there were additional traces of male DNA found on the cord and the paintbrush, and that there were 6 separate DNA samples belonging to unknown individuals that were found by the test.
Huh. That's a lot.
Now, here's the thing about that. Who knows how long that paintbrush sat in Patsy's collection?
True.
I buy paintbrushes all the time because I do a little bit of painting, like miniatures. And I go through paintbrushes at the store and I look at them and then I put them back. And I look at them and I put them back. So there's trace DNA. My trace DNA is on probably dozens of paintbrushes out there.
That's fair.
So 6 people, that makes sense. If 6 people handled that paintbrush before she bought it, there you go.
Yeah, that does make sense.
So
yeah,
because it's easy to put trace DNA anywhere.
True.
So former FBI profiler Candace DeLong believes that the DNA, having shown up identically in several different places on multiple surfaces, belonged to the killer. So there are people who believe that they have the DNA of who killed JonBenet, but they can't identify that person yet using that DNA. Forensics pathologist Michael Baden said, trace amounts of DNA can get on places and clothing from all different, non-suspicious means, and that there is no forensic evidence to show that it was a stranger that committed the murder. So he obviously leans towards looking at the family members. Experts, media commentators, and the Ramseys have identified potential suspects in this case, which we will obviously discuss later. Boulder police initially focused almost exclusively on John and Patsy, but by October of 97, they had over 1,600 people on their list of persons of interest.
Oh, damn. That's crazy.
That's a lot of
How the hell
fucking
do you
people.
That's
narrow
a
that
lot.
down?
Yeah. What? Also, how do you get that many people?
And that's crazy to me because it's like, I understand that it's not like the neighborhood isn't, super, super high end, but it's not like you're living in the ghetto. So there's no reason that that 1,600 people, that's crazy to me. Errors that were made in the initial investigation complicated the resolution of it, which makes sense, but those errors included loss and contamination of evidence, lack of experience and technical staff for the investigation, evidence that was shared with the Ramseys. So literally the police are sharing information with them while they're investigating them.
Yeah, this all could have been prevented.
Yeah, and the delayed interviews with the parents was also huge because by the time 4 months later, you're not going to remember everything as precisely.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was a bad move on their part regardless. So Lou Smith was a detective who came out of retirement in early 97 to assist the Boulder County District Attorney's Office with the case. In May of 98, he presented his findings to the Boulder police with other staff members of the DA's office, concluding that the evidence pointed away from the Ramseys. They were unable to successfully challenge the police department's belief that the Ramseys were guilty, however. So the DA's office sought to sort of take control of the investigation. So you have basically the local police saying they think the Ramseys are responsible. You have the DA's office that says we think they weren't responsible, and the two cannot agree on it.
That's nuts.
So due to the animosity between the police and the DA's office, and the pressure to obtain a conviction, Colorado Governor Roy Romer interceded and named Michael Caine as the special prosecutor to initiate a grand jury. Two of the lead investigators in the case had complete opposing views, and as a result, they both resigned.
Damn.
That escalated quickly. Damn.
It's crazy to think that kind of politics, that you can't agree to just investigate where no matter how many paths the evidence takes you down, you can't just agree to stay impartial. It's crazy to me.
Right. Huh.
Yeah, it's fucking crazy. I understand that because of how young she was, I'm sure that got people really worked up, but still.
Yeah, I mean, I guess it's just such a weird case.
It's very strange. And once we get to suspects and stuff, you'll see how much weirder it gets. Mary Lacey, the next Boulder County District Attorney, took over the investigation from the police in December of 2002. In April of 2003, she agreed with a federal judge who sat on a 2002 libel case that evidence in the suit is more consistent with a theory of an intruder that murdered JonBenet than it was with the theory that the Ramseys did it. On July 9th, 2008, the Boulder District Attorney's Office announced that as a result of new developments in DNA sampling and testing techniques, the Ramsey family members were excluded as suspects, and Lacey publicly exonerated them. In October of 2010, the Boulder police reopened the cold case. New interviews were conducted with a fresh inquiry by a committee that included state and federal investigators. Police were expected to use the latest DNA technology in their investigation, but there was no new information gleaned from any of all that. Yeah, so it's basically they're just spinning their wheels. In 2015, Beckner disagreed with exonerating the Ramseys, stating that exonerating anyone based on a small piece of evidence that has not yet been proven to even be connected to the crime is absurd.
That's fair.
Yeah. He also stated that the unknown DNA on JonBenet's clothing has got to be the focus of the investigation. They have to believe that the suspect is the donator of that unknown DNA.
I think that makes sense.
It should. Yeah, I'm really surprised we haven't used genetic genealogy on this one yet.
Yeah.
Because if anything's going to crack this case, it'll be that.
Yeah.
So in 2016, Gordon Combs, a former investigator for the Boulder District Attorney's Office, also questioned the total absolution of the Ramseys, stating, "We all shed DNA. It can be deposited anywhere at any time for various reasons that are completely benign. To clear someone on the premise of touch DNA, especially when you have a situation where the crime scene wasn't secured at the beginning, is a real stretch." Which makes sense.
Yeah, it
No,
does.
I agree.
JonBenet was buried at St. James Episcopal Cemetery in Marietta, Georgia on December 31st, 1996. She was interred next to her half-sister Elizabeth Ramsey, who had died in a car crash nearly 5 years earlier at the age of 22.
Oh, that's so sad.
Yeah, that family lost a lot.
Yeah, a car crash, which is just random and awful, and then a fucking murder.
Yeah.
Ugh. That poor family.
Patsy would die of ovarian cancer at the age of 49 in 2006, and she was interred next to her daughter.
Oh.
So that's the meat and potatoes of it. So now we're going to discuss some theories. And there are basically two primary theories about the death of JonBenet. The first is that a family member did it. So Boulder police initially concentrated almost exclusively on the parents, John and Patsy. According to Greg McCrary, a retired profiler with the FBI, statistically, it is a 12-to-1 probability that a family member or a caregiver is responsible for the homicide of a child. The police saw
12-to-1 as in like it's most likely, or like
12-to-1. It's most likely a family member or a caregiver. Yes.
Gotcha. Yep. Okay, that makes sense. I mean, often it's someone close.
Yeah. It's a rare occurrence when it's a stranger, especially one entering the house.
Yeah, especially one when it's like, I mean, obviously we're throwing this whole ransom shit out the window because clearly it wasn't actually ransom. It's just a weird note.
But when you take the time to meticulously create that ransom note, you got to think, well, did they know their way around the house? Like what was going on?
Yeah, it just all makes no sense.
And there was never a call, you know what I mean? And then they find the body in the house. Like, yes, the ransom note falls apart pretty quickly as important, I guess is the word I'm looking for. So the police saw no evidence of forced entry, but they did see evidence of staging the scene, such as the ransom note. Keep in mind that when police arrived at the crime scene that morning, it was the morning after Christmas Day, and they found no footprints in the snow or signs of a possible intruder. Linda Arndt, the first police officer to arrive at the scene that morning, looked around the house to no avail. When she sent John Ramsey and his neighbor, Fleet White, to search the house for anything unusual, she said Ramsey made a beeline straight to the basement cellar where he immediately found JonBenet. Although he had been told to leave everything where he found it, he picked her up, carried her upstairs, and removed the piece of tape from her mouth and placed her down. He even covered her with a throw blanket, further destroying vital physical evidence. That's when Arndt started to feel that perhaps John Ramsey knew too much.
At that point, it's too late. You've already destroyed so much evidence.
Right, but if you're the killer, you'd want to do that on purpose.
Well, obviously, yeah.
Right.
I mean, the way you just told that whole bit, it made it sound like he knew exactly what he was doing, exactly where he was going, exactly what he needed to do in order to destroy any chance
as much
of
evidence as possible.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm telling it
I don't know. I'm still stuck on this weird ransom note.
We'll get to that too. The reason I'm doing it this way now is because this is how the police were looking at it. Arndt stated that she found other actions of theirs suspicious as well, like how John and Patsy let the 10 a.m. deadline on the $118,000 ransom pass by without even talking about it. Like, if you truly believed that you're waiting for a call from a ransom call, and the time that they're supposed to call comes and goes and you don't say anything, that's suspicious.
That is really weird. I mean, as soon as that time hit, I'd be calling, or
you'd be waiting,
trying
you'd
to
be
figure
standing.
it
Right,
out.
because they didn't find her body until later.
Correct. So if 8 a.m. is the time that call, or 10 a.m. is the time that call is supposed to come in, I don't know about you, but I'd be like, guys, it's 9:55. Everybody keep it down, and we'd all be huddled around the phone.
Yeah,
Yeah. Oh,
exactly.
exactly. Yep.
But apparently they didn't bring it up. And
Weird as fuck.
yes, but to be fair, and I'll play devil's advocate here, we don't know how we would react in these situations. So
Right.
maybe they're not the types to be hyper fixated on like a deadline, but I know I would be.
Right, right. Obviously, unimaginable situation.
Right.
Or maybe it's just denial. They're like, okay, well, the
Right.
time came and went and nothing happened. So
Yeah, but I mean, I'd be even more concerned for my missing daughter at that point. But again, I'm not in that situation. And we can go back to our joke from a previous episode, Janice judges, right?
yeah, yes.
So Arndt described kneeling beside JonBenet's body, inches away from John Ramsey. She was so convinced the murder was in the house with her that she claimed that she quietly counted the bullets in her holster just in case she had to use them.
Damn.
Yeah. Police did not find the Ramseys cooperative in helping them solve the death of their daughter. The Ramseys had said that their reluctance was due to their fear that they would be hastily selected as key suspects, which makes sense. One theory is that Patsy struck JonBenet in a fit of rage after a bedwetting episode and strangled her to cover up what had happened, after mistakenly thinking she was already dead.
Hmm.
However,
Wow. That's crazy.
yeah.
That's a theory.
Yeah, but however, Patsy did not have a known history of uncontrolled anger. JonBenet's brother Burke Ramsey later said, "We didn't get spanked. Nothing of the sort, nothing close, nothing near laying a finger on us, let alone killing your child." So theoretically, the strangulation could have been a red herring aspect to conceal up other elements of the assault and the killing.
Mm-hmm.
Now, Burke, who was 9 years old at the time of JonBenet's death, was interviewed by investigators at least 3 times. The first 2 interviews did not raise any concerns about him. A review by a child psychologist stated that it appeared that the Ramseys had been a healthy, caring family and basically had that kind of relationship. In 1998, Boulder Police Chief Mark Becker said during an interview with a news reporter that Burke Ramsey was not involved in the killing of his sister. In May of 1999, the Boulder District Attorney's Office reiterated that Burke was not a suspect. The investigators had never considered him as a suspect. The Ramseys offered a $100,000 reward in the newspaper dated April 27, 1998. As previously stated, more than 4 months after they found JonBenet's body, the Ramseys finally submitted 2 separate formal interviews at the Boulder County Justice Center. In 1999,
Weird.
I know it's everything about their behavior doesn't make sense unless they're guilty, but it doesn't look like they're exactly guilty. It's so twisted. So in 99, Colorado Governor Bill Owen spoke out, telling the Ramseys to, quote, quit hiding behind their attorneys, quit hiding behind their PR firm, unquote.
Whoa.
That's a little intense.
A Colorado grand jury voted in 1999 to indict the parents, Patsy and John.
Whoa.
The indictment cited 2 counts each of child abuse and said the parents, quote, did unlawfully, knowingly, recklessly, and feloniously permit a child to be unreasonably placed in a situation that posed a threat of injury to the child's life or health, which resulted in the death of JonBenet Ramsey, a child under the age of 16, unquote. So they're not saying, they're not saying they killed her. They're saying they put her in a situation that led to her death.
That's
It's fucked
really
up.
hard conviction. Like, it doesn't really make sense.
It's really fucked up, yes. It's basically their way of saying, we can't prove you killed her, but we think you're responsible. Yeah.
Yeah, it just feels like a stretch. I don't even understand how that got past a jury.
Well, that's a grand jury, so it hasn't gotten to court. This is the group that decides whether or not they'll actually indict them.
Oh, got you.
Yes. So among the experts who testified in the case were DNA specialist Barry Scheck and a forensic expert, Henry Lee. On October 13th, 1999, Alex Hunter, who was the district attorney at the time, refused to sign the indictment, saying the evidence was insufficient for a prosecution. and the public thought that the grand jury investigation had been inconclusive. In 2002, the statute of limitations on the grand jury's charges expired. So basically, they were never going to be brought to court for anything. The grand jury's vote to indict was not revealed publicly until October of 2013, when previously sealed court documents were released. There was a show called The Case of JonBenet Ramsey, a show broadcast on CBS on September 18th and 19th of 2016, and they used a group of experts to evaluate the evidence. The group theorized that Burke might have been responsible for JonBenet's death. They theorized that he had hit his sister in the head with a heavy object, possibly a flashlight, after she stole a piece of pineapple from his bowl, likely not intending to kill her. Now, when I say a flashlight, you get to picture one of those really heavy-duty black metal flashlights.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
The autopsy included a perfectly rectangular defect that is suspected to have come from a blow to her head from a blunt object, a heavy flashlight, for example, seen in the photos on the kitchen counter in crime scene photos. So it was right there. And apparently that was the exact size of the indentation.
Huh.
Investigators claim that the flashlight fit the 8.5-inch gash in her skull to perfection. However, it should be noted that no trace evidence of JonBenet nor Burke were found on the flashlight. But again, clean that with like Sandy wipes.
Right.
Lastly, the wounds on JonBenet's back, previously assumed to have come from a stun gun, were also consistent with the edges of one of Burke's toy train tracks, which some suspected he may have used to poke his sister's unconscious body, hoping to get a response.
Or I guess it could have been like he could have been harassing his sister at any other time when she was still alive.
That's true too.
And left that mark on her like the day before Christmas Day. He's like, "Shut up, kid!" Stabs her with his train set.
True, but once you're already dead, the marks aren't going to go away. This is true. So basically, the theory that they put forward was that Burke was eating pineapple. JonBenet came downstairs. The parents are asleep. It's the middle of the night. She steals a piece of pineapple. He gets mad, grabs the flashlight, bashes her over the head, then uses a piece of his train track when she's not getting up and he's getting worried. And that's where they're going with it.
Okay.
So with that said, they suggested that the ransom note was left in an attempt to cover up the circumstances of JonBenet's death. Basically, at that point, they're saying the parents concocted the note, that he went and woke them up, that they wrote the note, and staged everything else, which is both believable and hard to believe, because could you imagine at that point having to be the one to stage the strangulation?
Right.
And all the ligature marks?
When you're just found out your kid's dead?
Yeah, it's one of those things like I don't know what to believe.
Yeah, like none of it makes sense. Also, like handwriting analysis? Question mark?
Yeah, well, and that's just it. Some sources say it fit Patsy perfectly. Other sources say not at all. It's all over the place. But again, that kind of analysis isn't an exact science.
It's not. It's true. But it's like at least like, I don't know, handwriting is recognizable. It's something.
Yeah, and from what I've heard, from what other sources, which I didn't really go into deep here, but they say that a lot of people were like, yes, it was definitely Patsy who wrote it. But it's really hard to say, especially because I'm not a handwriting expert.
Right, fair.
So on behalf of Burke Ramsey, his counsel filed defamation lawsuits against CBS, the producers of the program, and several of its participants based on many of its unsubstantiated claims. Now, lastly, something we should talk about here, is the 911 call that Patsy Ramsey made that morning.
Okay.
This also points to the Ramseys' involvement in the crime. According to the 911 operator who spoke to Patsy, the call seemed rehearsed, which would obviously point to deception. Harvard-educated author and lie detector John Miltimore states liars often rehearse their lies. It's possible that Patsy could have rehearsed the 911 call to appear genuine when it wasn't. And worse still is that multiple voices can be heard in the 911 call.
Do they have a recording?
So I've tried listening to it. I can't hear what they say is there. So
Gotcha. I guess maybe like when they use like.
yeah, they're using some super sophisticated equipment, and that's what we're
Mm-hmm.
about to talk about right here. Because it took many years for the technology to get to the point where they could make this part perfect, well, quote unquote, perfectly clear. It's widely thought that Patsy had failed to hang up the call when she believed that she had already done so. And as a result, you can hear someone talking afterwards. Investigators claim that they can allegedly hear John Ramsey saying, "We're not speaking to you," before Patsy Ramsey allegedly asks, "What did you do? Help me, Jesus." Then supposedly you
Huh.
then supposedly you can hear Burke saying, "What did you find?"
Huh. Well, none of that makes sense either, because then they would have already faked everything.
Correct. So she says
Now, was she calm during the recording, or was she frantic, or did they?
it's very over the top. Like, "Oh my God, you gotta help me." So it's tough to say if she's legitimately upset and over the top, or if it's a fake over the top like you see in movies.
Okay, all right.
It's
Right.
tough to
And it's
say.
like, yeah, it's tough. It's tough because it's like you never know.
Exactly.
Yeah, you never know. It's the death of your own child, or like the ransom of your own child
Yeah, and
at that point.
who knows what you really sound like when you're that upset, you know?
Exactly.
I have no idea what I would do if I walked out and saw my mother laying dead somewhere. I'd lose my fucking shit, but I don't know how well I'd keep it together. I don't know what my 911 call would sound like.
Yeah.
That's the truth. Because some people say, "Oh, he was too calm," or "He was faking it because he's so upset." I don't know what it'll be. I have a lot of military training. I could easily come off as perfectly calm, even though I'm a ball of mess. So going back to the call, if it's true that you can hear Burke on the phone, then this contradicts Patsy's earlier statement that Burke had been asleep the entire time.
Yeah.
Now, they do break down some of the things that she said during the call. They said that the repetition and transition of selected words is unusual in that kind of call. Patsy supposedly kept using the phrase "just" in the 911 call. So, according to statement analyst Mark McClish, people who minimize their action uses the word "just" in it as an indication that they may have done what they are telling you they didn't do. This means that,
Interesting.
yeah,
Okay.
so she's like, "I just found this," or I just found this note," kind of thing.
Yep. Okay.
So,
Yep.
so this may mean Patsy was trying to minimize her actions regarding JonBenet that morning. However, Patsy switches from using the word "gone" to "missing" when talking to the 911 officer. McClish states truthful people usually use the same language. So he says if Patsy was being truthful, why does she oddly switch between using the two words? Now, I personally, as a writer, I just, my mind, the way it works, I tend to use different words unless I'm trying to be specific and clear. So I don't know that that points to deception either.
Well, I mean, as a writer, are you not creating like false dialogue anyway?
That's true,
So,
but it filters into my day to day because I recognize how weird it is to say I need to filter this through the filter. Like I would automatically find another word for it.
mm-hmm.
That's just how my mind works. So I don't necessarily think that this proves anything, just that one bit. But it does look bad as a whole.
Yeah.
But again, we're not saying we're buying into either side. We're just presenting things as we research them. Okay, moving on. The second theory is the intruder theory. The police and prosecutors followed leads for intruders partly due to an unidentified boot mark left in a basement room where JonBenet's body was found. Hundreds of DNA tests were performed to find a match to the DNA recovered during her autopsy. Lou Smith, a detective in the case, assessed the evidence and concluded that it was an intruder who committed the crime. On the night JonBenet was killed, there had been 2 windows that were left slightly open to allow electrical cords outside to light Christmas lights. And there was a broken basement window and 1 unlocked door. Smith's theory was that someone entered the Ramseys' home through the broken basement window, but critics have questioned this theory because there was an intact cobweb in photos around that basement window. So how are you
Well, there
calling?
you go.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Smith believed that the intruder subdued JonBenet using a stun gun and took her down to the basement. And then JonBenet was killed and they left the ransom note. Author Stephen Singular, in his book Presumed Guilty, refers to consultants with cybercrime specialists who argue that she had attracted attention of child pornographers and pedophiles affiliated with child pageants. Singular further believes that the investigation was overly focused on the Ramseys and that hampered the investigations into alternate scenarios. Singular speculated that the scenarios explained why the grand jury did not recommend indicting the Ramseys' parents for murder, but for child abuse because they did sort of place their daughter in a dangerous situation by exposing her to potential predators at pageants. Which is a little...
Still a stretch.
It's still a
but
stretch,
I see where
yes.
they're going
Yes.
with it.
So it was determined that there were more than 100 burglaries in the Ramseys neighborhood in the months before her murder. There were 38 registered sex offenders living within a 2-mile radius of their home.
Jesus Christ.
It's crazy when you hear that. And they were in a
Hate to hear
good
that.
neighborhood, yeah.
Yeah.
Early persons of interest included the following. First, there was Santa Claus.
Wait, what?
Or more specifically, their neighbor Bill McReynolds, who played Santa Claus.
Okay, all right. I was like, are you fucking with me right now?
I couldn't resist. I'm sorry. So McReynolds had played Santa at the Ramseys' Christmas party 3 days prior, and that was the third year in a row that he had done so. So he had been in their home before, and he knew the layout. So he would have been familiar with which rooms were where and how to move about the house. He had written JonBenet a Christmas card that year saying that Santa would be giving her a special present after Christmas. That card was that card was found in her rubbish bin after her death.
That's sus.
Yep.
That's really sus.
At some point prior, JonBenet had gifted McReynolds a vial of glitter, probably thinking she was giving it to Santa, and that he had since considered her his special friend. Supposedly, he even brought that vial of glitter with him when he had to have heart surgery done. And even stranger, he asked his wife to mix the gold glitter with his ashes were he to die during the surgery.
Alrighty then.
Yeah.
Weird.
Really weird.
That's really weird.
Now, to throw a nice big curveball into this very same day in 1974, the day after Christmas, McReynolds' 9-year-old daughter and her friend had been abducted.
Seriously? Holy crud.
And his daughter witnessed the sexual assault of her friend.
Oh, God.
Oh, God.
Yes. No suspect had ever been found in that case. 2 years later, in 1976, McReynolds' wife Janet had written a play in which a young girl was molested, tortured, murdered, and left in a basement.
I'm sorry, what now?
Exactly. So, yeah, weird. Now, Bill McReynolds died in 2002, and so far as we know, nothing more has connected him to JonBenet's death. But it's really fucking weird, right?
Certainly some weird fucking people are around her.
So next, there was Chris Wolf, a local reporter whose girlfriend at the time reported him to police as a suspect. She said that Wolf had stormed out of the house that Christmas night and had come back the following morning with muddy clothes. He reportedly later became furious when he saw news reports of JonBenet's death on TV. The ransom note was signed at the bottom with the letters SBTC. And Wolf apparently had a sweatshirt bearing those initials, and those initials stood for the Santa Barbara Tennis Club. He had previously written an... Yeah, it's so fucked up.
What? What?
He had previously written an article about John Ramsey's company, Access Graphics, and may have had access to information about his Christmas bonus. He was also a friend of Santa Bill McReynolds. And there was a theory out there that there was more than one intruder that had been seriously considered. Yeah. Fucking weird.
Yeah, it's just there's a lot of
Exactly. There's a lot of weird questions. It's like I picture all the investigators are sort of like clowns at a circus and they're juggling like bowling pins, but everybody's
Yeah.
just throwing them in the air and you have no idea where the next one's going. That's how this feels.
Yeah.
The next person is a woman by the name of Linda Hoffman Poe. She had worked for the family as their housekeeper, and her husband Mervyn was also their handyman. So it shouldn't be surprising to anyone that they had a key to the house.
Yep.
During the investigation into JonBenet's murder, Hoffman Poe didn't even begin to fit the profile the police were after because they were looking at a white male, 20 to 35, former convict, that sort of thing. But she herself didn't hold back on voicing her suspicions about Patsy having accidentally killed JonBenet. With that said, Patsy claimed that to investigators that Hoffman Poe was struggling for money and had asked for a loan of several $1,000s, which Patsy declined.
Motive.
Police showed up at the Poe's home the night after the murder and asked the 57-year-old housekeeper to write the numbers $118,000 on a piece of paper and reportedly took her fingerprints and several strands of her hair. The Hoffman Poe theory asserted that the housekeeper led a trusting JonBenet down into the basement that night in an attempt to trick her employers into leaving money for her ransom. It's possible that she could have seen the pay stub for that money for the holiday bonus somewhere in the house, and that's what she chose for the demand. Now, she was familiar with both the home and the family's schedule, and Hoffman Poe makes a convenient suspect as she didn't even have an alibi because she was asleep in her bed at home, and her husband was allegedly sleeping on the couch that night. So they can't even corroborate each other.
Right, and in theory, like, that could be why the kid had a snack.
That's true,
It makes sense that she's like she wakes this kid up in the middle of the night and she's like, oh, why is the housekeeper here? Like, oh, can I have something to eat? Like, as someone she sees as like a caretaker.
Right, but then from there, why kill her? That's the part
Accident?
that maybe, but she has a blunt trauma to her head.
Yeah.
And then she was strangled after the fact because it did say her cause of death was strangulation after the blunt force trauma.
Right.
But unfortunately, all evidence implicating her is circumstantial at best, and she's never been formally accused of the crime. So we don't have an answer for her.
Yeah.
There was also a man by the name of Michael Helgoth, who died in an apparent suicide shortly after JonBenet's death. Michael Helgoth seemed to have shot himself the day after the district attorney announced that they were closing in on the killer. But this too started to look like murder. Helgoth was right-handed, but the trajectory of the bullet went from left to right. Now, in Helgoth's apartment, they found a pair of high-tech boots, which matched the boot print, a stun gun, and a baseball cap with the letters SBTC on it.
What the hell?
And a videotape of the news stories about unsolved kidnappings and murders of a 6-year-old girl. So if there were two killers, maybe this is one taking out the other to make sure they stayed quiet. But it's really tough to say. But that's all we know about Helgoth because he's dead. But they claimed it was a suicide. So another person of interest was a suspect by the name of Gary Oliva. Police allegedly found a magazine cutout of JonBenet in his backpack after he was apprehended on drug charges in 2000. Oliva was a registered sex offender and was publicly identified as a suspect in October of 2002. Oliva's high school friend, Michael Vale, stepped forward with an allegation supporting the investigators' suspicions. Vale claimed that not long after the murder, a distraught Oliva had called him on the phone and confessed to him that he had hurt a little girl. Vale revealed that he was particularly unsettled by how the knots that were used to fashion the garrote that strangled JonBenet were similar to those used in an incident where Oliva attempted to choke his own mother with a telephone cord.
Oh, damn.
Oliva was also rumored to have possible connections to a theory that links the marks found on JonBenet's body to the stun gun, as he had one on him at the time of his initial arrest.
Okay, interesting.
Really, really weird coincidences across the board. While he too was cleared by DNA testing for the JonBenet murder, he was later charged with 2 counts of sexual exploitation of a child and possessing child pornography. Maybe he didn't do it, but he certainly probably would have.
Right. He's done enough.
Yeah. And finally, the last person we're going to talk about was Alexis Val Reich, known as John Mark Carr at the time. She was arrested in Bangkok, Thailand in August 15th, 2006, following a false confession for murdering JonBenet. Reich, a 41-year-old school teacher, claimed to have drugged, sexually assaulted, and accidentally killed JonBenet. Now, we know she didn't do it because none of it matches, but there's a reason we're talking about this here.
Right, and wouldn't we have known if she had been drugged?
Yes, and there's no signs of sexual assault, exactly.
Yeah.
So according to CNN, authorities also said that they could not find any evidence linking Reich to the crime scene. In the confession, Reich had provided only basic facts that were publicly known and failed to provide any additional convincing details. The claim that JonBenet had been drugged further cast doubt on the confession because the autopsy indicated no drugs were found in her body. And furthermore, Reich's DNA didn't match the DNA found on JonBenet's body. Reich later came out as transgender, changing her legal name from John Mark Carr to Alexis Valeron Reich, or Dahlia Alexis Reich, according to a Washington state driver's license. But her false confession is not the most bizarre aspect of her possible involvement. And I say possible involvement very loosely, because what's happening, what I'm about to talk about, is so fucking disturbing, I could not leave it out. Reich is a reputed pedophile who supposedly married a 13-year-old girl and later...
I'm sorry, what?
And later a 16-year-old in the 1980s.
Oh, dear God.
Just, yeah, I'm just going to keep going.
All right.
And has more recently been trying to create a cult of JonBenet Ramsey lookalikes that he is calling the Immaculates.
Oh.
What the fuck?
No.
These would be blonde girls as young as 4 with small feet.
No.
She has been threatening harm to one of the girls, whom she used to recruit others and who escaped from her influence.
Oh my God.
19-year-old Samantha Spiegel, who says she met Reich when she was 9, at the time that Reich was a teacher's aide, and said they reconnected after Reich was on television for the court hearing of falsely confessing for killing JonBenet. That began an intense relationship over the internet that involved thousands of emails, which Samantha says is when Reich convinced her that she was special and destined to recruit for her all of her immaculates.
Oh, this is so nasty.
When Reich proposed to her and she accepted, Spiegel's parents intervened and sent her to a rehabilitation facility for 18 months to break her connection to Reich. But for 2 years, she said, Reich demanded that she try to recruit young girls into the cult.
Oh.
She said that when she emerged from treatment, Reich found her and, failing to reconnect, began a campaign of threats. Samantha stated, quote, "He said if I got in the way of him and his little girls, he would have me hunted down and killed," unquote. Yeah. She said that she is certain that Reich is now living as a woman in order to get closer to little girls. Reich...
Oh my God, that's nasty.
Yes, and Reich disputes these allegations, obviously. So that has nothing to do with JonBenet, really, other than the weird cult thing, but I couldn't leave that out.
Right, that's fucking disturbing.
It's so fucked up. So to wrap this all up, Lynn Wood, the Ramsey's family libel attorney, has filed defamation lawsuits against several people and companies that have reported on the case starting as far back as 1999 and continues to do so. So basically, be careful what you say out there. They're going to sue you for defamation. The simple truth is we don't know what happened that night, and despite some strong theories and many trails of circumstantial evidence, we may never know. So hopefully advances in DNA technology will provide the answers, But none of that changes the fact that a young girl with her entire life ahead of her was taken from the world. And that is the case of JonBenet Ramsey. Crazy.
Huh. Yeah, I feel like that's a very, very, very weird case.
And it's one of the reasons why it's never really left our collective consciousness. Everybody
Because
still
there's
talks
so much
about
there that's like all over the place and doesn't make sense.
the ransom note. If it wasn't, and again, this is just a thought, but if it wasn't written by one of the family members, what the fuck is the ransom note all about?
Yeah, like the housekeeper theory, I guess, like kind of makes sense for the ransom note. If like they were like, oh, well, like tell them that we were gonna drop the kid off back in her house, and then they like accidentally kill her, but then like who did it? And like doesn't so weird.
Yeah, I mean, if it's not the family with the ransom note, it's somebody who's trying to sound smart and sound like they know what they're doing.
Right. And so I understand that, we've had cases before where a little girl was taken in the night and told to be quiet, and she did. Right.
Yeah.
We know this. So
Yep.
if JonBenet's cooperating, then why is she struck on the head with a flashlight? And then why is she then afterwards strangled to death?
Right.
Why was everything taken from the house? They didn't bring a single thing in preparation? None of it makes sense.
No, it's both prepared and unprepared. Like they clearly like researched how to make this ransom note. They were like, "Oh, we know so much about what the government will do." Like
Right? The note was the worst part of the whole thing.
the
Yes.
note. Obviously, I've been stuck on the note the whole time.
Right. The SBTC. I'm really hoping that's not the Santa Barbara Tennis Club.
This doesn't even make sense. Like, why would you put that on the even if you? I have nothing to say. It just doesn't make sense.
Well, there's another theory that I didn't really go into where basically someone believes there's another killer out there that traveled the country and they believe that he may have been part of it, but I didn't bother to include it because it's incredibly unlikely, because they also claim that this person may have also been the Zodiac killer, and I'm like, come on, like enough.
Oh, come on. Really? No
Yeah.
way.
Enough.
Sounds like some shit that a real true crime fan would come up with because they're like, "Oh, I know about true crimes."
Yeah, we're going to make one person responsible for everything. Yeah, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, I have my general thoughts, but
Right. Like I guess like what I can say is the only theory of all the things you presented that like half makes sense is that it was someone in the family, but it still doesn't make sense. So it's like
right, because hypothetically, if a 9-year-old accidentally kills his 6-year-old sister, he's not going to be held accountable for manslaughter. He's 9 years old.
right.
So why go through all that?
It doesn't that doesn't make sense.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the Ramseys personally, but my assumption would be they're smart enough to know that. So that's why I don't 100% buy into that theory.
Yeah.
It just, none of it
I
makes
guess like
sense.
they could be stupid and
Panic?
panic, yeah.
Yeah.
But it also could have been any of those like weird pedophiles in the area.
Yeah, and that's what I mean. Some of the people on that list are convincing. That the Santa Claus
Yeah.
guy, that's fucking weird.
Yeah, there's some real weird behavior around this little girl.
Yeah, like I've known my friends' children their whole lives, and throughout the years I've been given little gifts and little things that they made for arts and crafts and whatever. I would never be like, I want this buried with me if I die. Like, that's weird.
Yeah, that'd be really weird.
Right? That's just fucking odd. But I want this glitter mixed with my ashes. Like, that's a guy who's hyper
Yeah,
fixated.
that was creepy.
Yeah. And I mean, we can say whatever we want now. He's dead. He can't defend himself, but it's still fucked up. Yeah. I don't know. So yeah, Joyous, that was for your information right there. You now know quite a bit about JonBenet Ramsey.
And still so little.
It's so true. Yes. It's a frustrating case. And this is why I hate unsolved cases, but this is too famous not to do.
Yeah, like I'm glad I know about it now. It's definitely like in the pop culture and like it's something you hear about and it's just very interesting. Yeah.
Yeah, you could tell you knew more because you had specifics down where with Bundy and Gacy, you did not.
Yeah, and it's because this is more recent that I know more about it.
Very possible, and especially because it's, again, I still think that JonBenet stays in the public's attention because it's unsolved. And it's
Right, unsolved is very like yeah, there's like more questions other than like where those other like really famous ones. It's just like we're like, why the fuck, what makes a person do this, those kinds of questions that go across all crime
Right.
and all murder. Whereas this one, it's like, this is weird as fuck. Like, really, really, no one can make a theory that makes sense. It's baffling.
Yeah, and the best theories fit, I would say maybe 90% of it, but then there's still that 10% of the, but none of it makes sense without that 10%.
Exactly.
So, yeah, who knows? Who knows what exactly happened? And like I said, maybe like the familial DNA thing will help, but I don't know. Like, I honestly, like I've said this before, I think we're going to see a lot more cases solved thanks to that. But I don't know if this will be one of them because they're talking,
Yeah.
6 people's trace DNAs on a paintbrush. Like, who knows? They knowing what we've heard, the Boulder PD probably fucked up that evidence anyway.
Yeah, it's probably half the Boulder PD.
It'd be funny if the Boulder PD did it.
Oh my God. Now there's a theory.
Although it does make me think of the one we discussed last week with the girl that was being held against her will in Romania, where I'm convinced the police and government officials were part of that sex trafficking ring. It has to be.
Yeah, no, I'm with you there. That one makes total sense.
Yeah, but JonBenet, her death is, if it wasn't an accident, then none of it makes sense. It just doesn't.
Yeah.
Yeah, but anyway.
Weird as fuck.
So thank you, everybody, for listening to us discuss this case that has been overly discussed. But we appreciate you all being here. We'll see you soon. I am Janice Dead.
I'm Jameson Dead.
And I'm Joyous Dead.
And we'll see you next week.
Bye.